a case that continues to capture attention worldwide. Over the years, Brad has become a passionate advocate for his sister, tirelessly seeking answers and keeping her story alive. Brad, first of all, welcome to the show. We appreciate you coming on.
No problem, guys. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, Brad, when you first heard that Netflix was producing a documentary on Amy's case, what were your initial thoughts, and how long ago did they initially approach you?
I mean, I'd have to look back. I think it was early part of 2024. We were talking to a guy by the name of Bo Carson, who lives out in LA, and he was helping us with some things. And one day he said he had these producers from Ample Entertainment that he'd like to introduce us to, who were interested in doing a documentary about Amy. And we, every time, for 27 years, anytime something comes up, we absolutely do it. We try not to leave any opportunity on the table. So, yeah, but I think the overall project took, I'm guessing, 18 months, a year and a half or so from the time it started until it came out a couple weeks ago.
So, Brad, I think sometimes when we hear stories like this in life, like sometimes people become a name and not just like a human being, or it's like the facts, or people on the internet just want to find out certain things. So I was wondering if before we got too deep into it, you could share like some good memories with Amy, or like some things from your childhood that you'd be comfortable sharing with us.
Yeah, man. I mean, Amy she and I, other than when I was little and was the annoying little brother. Once I kind of grew up and she stopped yelling at mom and dad to get me out of her room, we became really good friends, and we grew up, in a really nice neighborhood. We played in the creek. We rode our bikes. We played basketball. We had a hoop in the driveway. She was always better than me until I got big enough to just kind of back her down to the rim. But we spent a lot of time together. Grew up swimming on the swim team. Lots of years and time spent at the pool. We were always just really close. And when she in high school, I'd go hang out with her and her friends when they'd have parties, and I'd go visit her up at Longwood and hang out with them, and we'd shoot pool when she came back into town. And obviously I was still living at home when she came, back to visit from Longwood, and we'd always go out and be hanging out together. But it was, we had an awesome childhood. I know a lot of people aren't lucky enough to say that, but I certainly can. So, it was all good, man. It was, she and I were more like best friends than brother and sister, there towards, in our early 20s. So, everything was great.
Thanks for sharing that,
Brad. A thing with these documentaries are they're really good to get exposure, and obviously this has brought a ton of new exposure to Amy's case, but they also do tend to paint a picture the way that they want it painted and the way that they want it produced. I wanted to ask about like your grade of the accuracy of the Netflix documentary, and if there was anything that, to start off our interview with you today, you wanted to, right off the rip say that you wanted to explain or correct from the Netflix documentary.
Yeah, I don't think they, I got asked this last night actually in an interview, and first thing I always preface with is that, myself and my parents and our family and our friends are all, extremely grateful to Ari, Mark, and Phil Lott, the producers that put this together. They brought Amy's name back to life around the world, and people are all talking about it, and it had been a number of years that this whole story had kind of gone stagnant. So I first want to say we were very pleased with it, and we think they did a great job, and again, we'll be forever grateful for the attention that it's brought. I guess the only thing other than them leaving out a lot of important, pertinent information and details about things, and it's to be fair, you can't fit 27 years worth of stuff in 3 episodes.
Yeah.
So I think they did a good job telling the story to get people's attention, and they succeeded in that. Early on when I started the X page, and I was never big on social media other than just kind of swiping through and looking. But it bothered me that so much time was spent on her sexual preferences or sexuality, and the whole story wasn't told. You may have seen other interviews I've done where I've talked about this, but Amy had a boyfriend that she worked with, and they were dating for several months leading up to the cruise. They flew him out and interviewed him for like 5 hours, and he has nothing but wonderful things to say about Amy. He loved her. I'm not 100% sure she had the same strong feelings toward him, but he was completely excluded from the story, and people, they painted a picture that Amy was, just a lesbian and straight gay, and that really wasn't the case. And I think it made a lot of people think that it was something that we had just learned before the trip. And I mean, Amy came out to us. Actually, I was at school, so she came out to my parents in 1995, and then I think a couple weeks later, I still remember where we were here in Chesterfield, and when she told me, and I was like, oh, okay, great. So I never had any problems. She dated guys, she dated girls. I liked her boyfriends, I liked her girlfriends. They all spent time at the house, spent a lot of time with the family, went on trips with us, spent the night. It was all, nobody cared. I mean, obviously the initial surprise that my parents, and I think it's fair to say not many parents would choose that for their children, but it was well gotten over. Nobody had there was no contention between she and I, between her and my parents. We were all very happy. We loved Amy just like we always did, very much. And unfortunately, the way that it was presented, I think, and especially there was one particularly kind of disgruntled ex that talks about my dad writing this 3-page letter. My dad has told me, at best that thing was like 2 paragraphs on 1 page, and it was in response to, some shit she said. He doesn't remember what spurred the letter, but she can't produce this alleged 3-page letter. So a lot of people have the wrong idea about our family. They make assumptions. They look at my ex page, and this whole thing, bringing up politics is just stupid when we're talking about this, but I support Trump, so I'm just a racist homophobe, I guess. And everybody just has everybody that feels and says the nasty things that they say online is just straight up wrong. They don't know us, and they don't know Amy. Amy can't speak for herself, and hopefully one day, if we're lucky enough to find her, she can set the record straight on that.
So, Brad, I wanted to ask you about people jumping to conclusions on the internet based off of things they saw or heard in the Netflix documentary. Where do you think Amy's head was at, like how excited she was for the cruise and approaching it, like through the lens of having a boyfriend, like despite what Molly said, I guess, about possibly meeting up when she got back?
Well, and I'd like to start that answer by saying that, Amy had written her boyfriend, whose name I'm leaving out of this because I don't want the world, coming and looking him up. But she wrote him a letter, I think a couple weeks before the cruise, kind of thanking him for everything, telling him how much fun she'd had with him and how wonderful she thought he was, how much time, how much she enjoyed spending time with his family and having him around ours. But that, she wanted to kind of step back and take things a little slow. So it was almost maybe kind of like a little breakup note. And I don't doubt that Amy probably had plans to get back together with Molly. Molly's great. I have known Molly a lot of years. She was at my parents' house Easter before last for dinner. We've always had a great relationship, and I like Molly a lot. So that having been said, you're gonna have to repeat your question because I kind of went on a tangent and forgot the point.
Yeah, no worries at all. So I was just kind of wondering where you thought Amy's head was entering the trip, like how excited she was to be with your family amidst all this.
And I mean, both of us. So I'm afraid of flying. I really don't fly unless I absolutely have to. So I had a little hesitation about going on the trip just because we had to fly down to Florida and San Juan. She had a hesitation about the trip because she didn't like the ocean not, as far as what was in it. So we both kind of got over our little fears, and we're really both really excited. When Mom and Dad told us they had gotten permission for us to go, we were pumped. We packed together. We talked about what we were going to do. We flew down together separately from my parents. We were having a great time, and on the trip, we were going to the pool, we were going to the casino, we were going to the dance club, we were having drinks. We went out on an excursion on Aruba. She had just recently graduated college, had a great job at one of the top restaurants here in Richmond. She was actually getting ready to start a new job with my uncle's computer company when she got back. She'd just gotten a brand new apartment. She had just gotten an 8-week-old English Bulldog puppy that she'd wanted her whole life. She was buying gifts for friends. She was writing postcards to her friends back home, talking about what they were going to do when she got back. I mean, she was great. I mean, we were having a good time, and she wasn't struggling with her identity. There was none of that crap. So anybody that thinks that, I mean, you can't control what people think and the assumptions they make and or their opinions. But, Amy didn't care about any of that.
And then you had also mentioned just her fear of the water, right? And just that's obviously a big part of going on a cruise. And is that what makes it so not plausible to you for the people that will say like, oh, well, she fell, or she could have been sick and, jumped off the side, or whatever it might be? Like, her fear of the water was something that you and your family were plenty aware of even prior to going onto the ship.
Yeah. And it wasn't, I mean, to be fair, I mean, or, clear, she wasn't afraid of the water. I mean, we grew up swimming. She swam like a fish. She coached the swim team. She was a lifeguard. She was proficient in the water. So being in the water wasn't a problem.
Right.
It's what's in the water that you can't see. So certainly one of the things that makes it ridiculous that she would, jump off a balcony 8 stories up and terrify herself to death didn't happen. And then plus there was no reason for her to do that. She was very happy, had a lot going on in her life. Everything was very exciting and new. She was kind of starting her big girl life, and then as far as her falling over the rail, I mean, Amy was 5'6". The rails were, I don't know exactly how tall, 42, 48 inches tall. Her center of gravity is much lower than the rail. And she wouldn't even go near the thing. I mean, when we got on the boat the first night, I leaned over the rail and looked straight down at the water. And I'm like, oh my God, look at this. And she said, nope. She stood back by the sliding glass door, and at no point on that trip would she even go near the rail. So the crap about the table being pushed up against the balcony, that morning when we woke up, that table was against the sliding glass door next to the chair she was sitting in. The FBI had me, my dad, and my mom in separate rooms, each draw where the furniture was that morning. All 3 of those drawings, the table's against the window. Now, you heard the FBI agents say that the cruise staff cleaned the room. So I think they'd love everybody to think that she jumped or fell, because that eliminates any liability they have. And my opinion is that table was moved when the room was clean, because that's not where it was when we woke up.
Brad, first off, I just want to say thoughts and prayers to you and your family. Obviously, some that hard to imagine for anyone to be going through what you guys have gone through ever since that happened. I want people report things to you all about what they may have seen, or sightings or anything of that nature. How hard it can be at times to decipher what may be real and what's fake. Because sometimes people may, just kind of want to be a part. Like when Netflix is dropping a documentary, they want to just, say, oh, well, I saw this X amount of years ago. Just to be a part of it was like, why didn't you say anything then? And like how, because for you guys, that's something that, when you get another lead, that's something that could exhilarate you, but sometimes it's hard to distinguish.
Yeah, we've been on that roller coaster of hopes up and hopes dashed 100 times. It's and we're hopeful that this ride doesn't end the same way. It's hard. I mean, back in the day, I don't know if you guys know about Frank Jones, the guy that conned us out of $200 some thousand, claiming posing to be like an ex-special forces kind of guy. We were actually in a hotel room down in Fort Lauderdale that we flew down to and had a private jet on standby because he was down in the islands with this team of operators, and they knew where Amy was. They were tracking the people that were in control of her. They went as far as to stencil tattoos on a woman and take pictures of her sitting on the beach with one of her alleged captors. And we ended up having a guy who's been with us ever since that outed that guy, Frank Jones, for being a fraud. So that was a huge, I mean, we thought that was it. We thought we had her. He ended up spending 5 years in jail for electronic fraud, for, sending the pictures and those kinds of things, and was ordered to pay mandatory restitution, of which we never saw a dollar. So those kinds of things, you have people come out of the woodwork that, and just like now, we got these things on TikTok about this lady, and we found that, I don't know if you guys have seen it, this blonde lady from behind Curacao. We found the original photo and our investigator spoke to that woman's daughter. Someone photoshopped those tattoos on that picture. That original picture didn't have any tattoos. So that kind of stuff still happens. And yeah, it's hard to figure out what's what. I mean, we have a small team of people that are helping us, go through all these emails and all these pictures and all these opinions and theories. And it's a lot. I mean, there's thousands and thousands of pieces of information that are coming in that were, some are credible enough to have to, go after and rule it out as far as, how significant it may be or not. But yeah, it's really tough. And it does, you see certain things and your heart flutters and you're like, oh my God. And then it's like, yeah, oh well. So we're hoping and we're dependent really on somebody coming forward. I mean, there's one person that knows something. I think there's probably quite a few people that know something. And all this seemingly hinges on somebody growing half a conscience and coming forward and deciding it's time to, provide the information that they've been holding on to. So yeah, I hope that answered your questions. If there's any part of it that I didn't, just shoot again.
Yeah, no, thank you so much. Brad, we were as a group very fascinated by the Church of Scientology element, as well as the room check, which we talked about a little bit. But could you possibly explain maybe more about what you believe could have went on between them and your family?
What I'll say first before I explain that interaction, you have to understand when this Netflix series came out, it was the first time in about 25 years that everybody's paying attention. And I've been talking about this Scientology theory. I don't know if it's a theory or just something that's bothered the hell out of me for the last 25 years, because every single media outlet or news organization or interview that I've done, I've talked about it. And nobody ever will include it in the story. They don't bring it up. They exclude that part of the interview every single time. And so I took it upon myself to, make it known, because it's always been something that's bothered me. I always felt that the FBI was, dismissive of the theory, and they'd say like, yeah, well, we looked and there's nothing there. And it wasn't satisfying to me. So, this all goes back to two ladies that Amy was talking to the night of the pool party before, it transitioned into the next day, early morning. And she spent about an hour talking to these two ladies, which, by the way, the FBI has told us before that they know who these people are, these ladies are. They have never told us who they are. They won't. So if they would simply have said, these ladies were customs officials from Aruba or police officers, which I've heard in recent interviews by some ex-Cruise staff, that is who they suggest that those ladies were, and those uniforms kind of matched either Aruban or Curacao police or customs officials that were on that boat for some reason. So, you got a bunch of people get on the boat. It's like this entourage that comes on with the performers and the dancers and the jugglers and all the, people that were performing at the party. And it was this large group of people that weren't passengers or employees of the boat that just got on in a large group. And I think those ladies got on the boat that night from Aruba before we left. So forget what I just explained that I've heard recently. You got to understand, I'm living 25 years thinking about these two ladies. And so fast forward. Okay, so we get off the boat on on Curacao. The evening after the same day Amy disappeared, probably about 5 p.m. I don't know exactly. And the president of my dad's company and his wife got off with us to help us. We weren't in any shape to figure out what to do or handle anything really. We were a complete mess. So they got us a hotel room. I think it was called the Otra Banda along the canal there. And the unfortunate part about that is that hotel was where we had to watch our boat leave on time, on schedule that evening when they left Curacao. So we're in the room that night. We're contacting family back in Virginia. My ex-girlfriend, the one that was shown in the series, she was watching the animals in the house while we were gone. Everybody kind of convened at our house, aunts and uncles and cousins and, grandparents, everybody was there by the time people started finding out what had happened. So we spent some time talking to family. My mom was talking to one of her brothers about helping get the FBI involved, because had it not been for my family's efforts at home, FBI never would have been there. After all that passed, the scene was horrible. My dad was so upset, he's throwing up and he's, vomiting blood at some point. My mom's curled up in a fetal position, just losing it on the bed. I'm sitting there in the chair. At one point I had to get out and get some fresh air. And I walk out and sit on the rocks and look at the ocean and kind of ponder life and try and, I'm racking my brain about what may have happened or what could have happened. The evening goes by and my mom eventually requests that Mike McCord, who's since passed, the president of my dad's insurance company, find us a priest to come to the room to pray with us. So apparently, I don't know whether it was the embassy or the U.S. consulate contacted some local churches and they weren't able to find a priest. So around midnight, someone knocks on the door. We don't know anybody's coming. And these two guys are standing there in like maritime, kind of like captain's outfits, like naval kind of uniforms. And they introduce themselves as Steve Alpers and a guy named Ludwig. I don't remember his last name. My mom knows all this stuff, but they introduce themselves as officers from the Scientology ship called the Free Winds. Only thing I'd heard about Scientology is that, they do a lot of weird stuff and I'm not into it. So we say, okay, come in, because we assumed they were there to try and help us in some way. So they come in and they explain that they have methods and ways to help people deal with grief and loss. And they wanted to do some verbal exercises and these kind of, I don't even know what to call them. So, we're sitting there and they'd say, okay, now that you've lost Amy, tell us something you haven't lost. And so we would each take turns individually. Now that we've lost Amy, we haven't lost each other. Now that we've lost Amy, we haven't lost our family and our friends back home. And this went on, we took turns, 3 or 4 times and went through that exercise. And then they went into asking really specific questions about, did Amy smoke, and what were Amy's favorite cigarettes? Did Amy drink alcohol, and what did she drink? What was her favorite beer? even down to like what were her favorite snacks, what's her favorite soda. And again, at the time, it was like, okay, we're remembering her, very fondly, and it was very emotional. And but later it kind of struck me that they were garnering a lot of really specific information about her, which bothered me to no end for years and years and years, because I couldn't ever get anybody to pay attention to what a weird experience that was. They ultimately kind of had us lay down on the bed, face down, and they kind of laid hands on your back and would rub their hands up your back. And when that started, my dad kind of spoke up and was like, "All right, guys, we appreciate you coming, but please leave." They actually invited us to come on to the Free Winds, and we were like, "Nah, we're good." So we didn't do that. So when I got home from that trip, we were doing everything we could to try and figure out what the hell happened. So I get online and I'm doing a lot of research into Scientology, and I'm looking at the Free Winds and find out it's headquartered in Curacao, which obviously we didn't know or have any clue about. That boat travels to Aruba, where she was allegedly seen. That boat is headquartered in Curacao, where she was allegedly seen by eyewitness, and that boat goes to Barbados, and back and forth repeatedly. That's the track that boat is on. I found uniforms, which since I've been told isn't the case, but back then I found uniforms that were pretty much the same exact uniforms that those two ladies Amy was talking to were wearing. Since I posted that on X, everybody tagged all these people and these ex-Scientologists. We were never able to elicit any response from Leah Remini over the years after repeated attempts and to communicate with her. She just never responded.